Diplomat's Archives, Hidden Stories. This is the 13th story.
My name is VũHồ, Ambassador of Vietnam to Korea.
Today, we're going to explore a hidden story between Korea and Vietnam. South Korea and Vietnam officially established diplomatic ties 33 years ago on December 22, 1992. And the current Vietnamese ambassador VũHồ is the son of Vu Quan, former Deputy Prime Minister of Vietnam. He is known as one of the key figures who laid the foundation for diplomatic ties between South Korea and Vietnam 33 years ago.
At the time, my father was Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he was in charge of the Northeast Asia. My father would have a very good impression of the South Korea. We have a lot of things in common. South Korea developed a lot, so we need lessons. We need to experience. We need fund, investments, trades, everything. So Korea is it's a fit country to start the normalization process, to make sure that we have diversifications in our relationship with other countries.
Though the two countries formally established diplomatic relations 33 years ago, in reality, the connection between the two countries goes back much further. And today, we'd like to share that story. In 1226, that is 799 years ago, there were people who left their homeland, Vietnam, and traveled through southern Song, Chin, and eventually arriving on the Korean Peninsula. One of them was Lee Yong-sang, known in Korean as Lee Yong-sang. He was a prince of Vietnam's LýDynasty. Prince Lee Yong-sang, along with his family and followers who accompanied him to the Korean Peninsula, eventually settled in Hwasan District, Imjin County, Chunghyodang Province in Goryeo. Since 111 BCE, Vietnam had been under Chinese rule for a long time. Although it gained independence in 939, China's pressure and internal political turmoil continued. Amid this turmoil, the Lee dynasty was established in 1009, ushering in a period of stability. The founding emperor of the Lee dynasty, Lee Tai-to, named the country Dai Viet and designated Thang Dong as the capital of the new dynasty, what is now modern-day Hanoi. The Lee dynasty was also the first Vietnamese dynasty to break away from the Chinese tributary system and independently choose its own monarch.
In fact, it's the first ever dynasty in Vietnam that promotes our independent state. And it has contributed a lot to the development of Vietnam by establishing the first time ever the administrative system in Vietnam with the king and all the systems. The second thing that the Lee dynasty has done to Vietnam is introduce the legal system. The first time ever that the Vietnamese people are governed by law, by the civil law. And the third thing that the Lee dynasty did is to introduce education and agriculture to the Vietnamese nations. So they are one of the most significant dynasty in Vietnam.
But why did Lee Yong-sang and his family leave Vietnam and end up on the Korean Peninsula, then ruled by the Goryeo dynasty? Prince Lee Yong-sang, or Lee Yong-sang in Korean, was born in 1174 as the seventh son of Emperor Lee Yong-sang, the sixth ruler of the Lee dynasty. When his older brother, Emperor Lee Gao-dong, took the throne, real power increasingly came under the control of royal in-laws and powerful court officials. Also, a series of natural disasters led to widespread uprisings during his reign. Emperor Lee Gao-dong died in 1210, and the eighth emperor Lee Hwasan ascended the throne at the age of 16. He married Jeon Di-sung, daughter of Jeon Lee, as his official queen and entrusted national affairs to her younger brother Jeon De-hain. This marked the beginning of the Jeon family's rise to power. Emperor Lee Hwasan was in poor health and later began to show signs of mental instability. Although Jeon De-hain died in 1223, the power he had accumulated passed on to his cousin, Jeon Ju-do. In 1224, as Emperor Lee Hwasan's condition worsened, he abdicated in favor of his 7-year-old daughter. This young princess would become Vietnam's first female monarch, Lee Ju-hwang. But by then, Jeon Ju-do had already seized control of the royal court. He arranged for Lee Ju-hwang to marry his nephew and in 1225 had her formally abdicate in favor of her husband. After usurping the throne, Jeon Ju-do moved to eliminate the Lee royal family, now the former dynasty. Sensing the threat, the Lee clan fled Vietnam. Lee Yong-sang, or Lee Yong-sang in Korean, along with his family and followers, secured a boat and fled Vietnam. After traveling through southern Song and Jin, they eventually arrived at Hwasan District, Ongjin County, Hwangin-do Province in Goryeo. To learn more about this, we met with an expert. Professor Park Sun-kyo has written extensively about the Lee dynasty, Prince Lee Yong-sang, and their descendants since 2012. He also published novels based on Prince Lee Yong-sang and other descendants of the Lee dynasty.
역사에는 여러 요소가 있는데 시간, 공간, 인물이 있습니다. 그 세 가지 측면에서 이용상은 매우 특별한 인물이고 특히 베트남에서 제국이 출현하면서 등장한 인물이기 때문에 또 고려와 연결된다는 점에서 국제적인 성격을 가지고 있습니다. 그래서 제가 관심을 가졌고 지금까지 그 뿌리를 찾게 되었다고 생각합니다.
At the time of Lee Yong-sang's arrival, the ruling dynasty of the Korean Peninsula was Goryeo. But why did he choose to settle in Goryeo rather than any other country?
그 이용상이 고려 땅에 오게 된 데는 시대적 분위기가 크게 작용했다고 생각합니다. 중국 전역이 혼란의 도가니였습니다. 송나라는 북쪽 금나라와 치열한 접전 중이었고 금나라 역시 몽골의 확장에 따라서 내부가 어수선한 상황이었습니다. 몽골의 맹장 무칼리가 금나라 전역을 7년 동안 휩쓸었고 만주 지역에서는 거란족이 새로 흥기했고 이를 진압하러 간 금나라의 장수가 실패하면서 또 다른 나라를 세우게 됩니다. 결국 중국 전역, 만주 전역이 전쟁의 도가니에 휩쓸리면서 이용상은 보다 조용한 땅, 전쟁이 없는 땅, 전쟁의 불길과 참화를 피해 결과적으로 고려 땅에 이르게 되었다. 이렇게 생각할 수가 있습니다.
Another reason Lee Yong-sang was able to settle in Goryeo may have been the dynasty's open policy toward foreigners at the time.
고려가 건국될 당시 이미 중국은 15개의 나라로 분열된 대혼란기였습니다. 전쟁을 피해 많은 사람들이 고려 땅에 들어왔고 발해가 망하면서 발해 유민이 대거 고려에 들어오게 됩니다. 또 거란이 망하면서 거란의 유민이 들어오게 되고 금나라가 몽골에 침탈당하면서 금나라 유민들이 또 들어오게 됩니다. 고려는 이러한 상황 속에서 유민을 대거 흡수하는 풍토가 건국 과정에서부터 이미 조성되어 있었습니다.
Records of how Goryeo received Lee Yong-sang upon his arrival still remain in the Ongjin County Annals, or Ongjin Buupji, a local history book.
Lord Hwasan, Lee Yong-sang, was the Vietnamese emperor's brother. As their country was on the brink of collapse, he crossed the sea carrying ancestral relics, accompanied by his family and loyal troops, and arrived in Ongjin County. It was during the reign of King Gojong of Goryeo, who, feeling pity for the royal descendant of a foreign land, granted him the noble title of Lord Hwasan.
고려는 건국 과정부터 여러 사성 정책을 썼고, 그래서 내부의 호족들을 흡수하고 외부의 유민을 흡수하는 정책을 사용했습니다. 그러나 이용상의 경우에는 리 왕조의 리와 용상이라고 하는 베트남의 이름을 그대로 가져왔습니다. 그러니까 고려 귀하인 중에서는 매우 특별한 경우에 해당됩니다. 그는 고려 왕실로부터 받은 화상군이라고 하는 작호, 그리고 이용상이라고 하는 베트남에서부터 가져온 이름을 그대로 가지고 있었습니다. 그 권력이나 명예를 추구하지 않고 옹진이라고 하는 아주 한적한 곳에 머물렀기 때문에 고려 왕실의 직접적인 간섭으로부터는 자유로웠고, 따라서 자신의 성명을 그대로 간직하고 있었다고 봅니다. 또 그 이면에는 대월에 대한 자신의 정체성, 그리고 향수, 고국에 대한 이제 일말의 자긍심 작용한 것이 아닌가, 이렇게 생각됩니다.
After naturalizing in Goryeo, Lee Yong-sang was granted the surname Hwasan Lee by the royal court. Thus, he became the founding ancestor of the Hwasan Lee Clan. Our team set out to meet some of Lee Yong-sang's descendants currently living in Korea to hear more about him and the history of the Hwasan Lee family.
저는 화산이시 종친회 대종회장 이훈입니다. 저는 이용상 중시조 화산군의 25대 손이고 이태조 이공은 선조의 30대 손입니다.
Today, around 2,000 descendants of the Hwasan Lee Clan live in South Korea. According to the Clan Association president's estimate, about 6,000 to 7,000 descendants of the Hwasan Lee Clan are believed to be living in North Korea as well.
항상 어려서부터 말씀하신 게 있어요. 너희는 그 한국에서 살고 있지만 너희는 베트남 이왕조의 후예고, 그래서 모든 일에 하나하나 행동 거지에 조심해야 되고, 특히 그 재물에 그렇게 욕심을 많이 내지 말고, 그 다음에 남들이 말을 하는 거 경청을 잘 하고, 그 다음에 남을 대할 적에는 최대한 예우를 갖추고 대하라, 이런 말씀하셨고, 선친들이 모든 일에 대해서 행동 하나하나 거에서 저희한테 굉장히 조심스럽게 가르쳐 왔습니다.
According to him, after South Korea and Vietnam established diplomatic relations, it was actually the Vietnamese side that first reached out to the descendants of the Hwasan Lee Clan living in Korea.
수교를 하고 저희 그 초대 그 베트남 대사 빈 대사님이 계셨는데, 빈 대사님이 그 우연치 않게 화산이 씨를 찾게 됐어요. 대사관에 가가지고 그 베트남에 대해서 우리가 화산이 씨고 그걸 알리게 됐고, 그 이후로 이제 빈 대사하고 많은 접촉이 있었고, 그 바람에 이제 베트남에서 많은 예우를 해주게 되었습니다.
Prince Lee Yong-sang first arrived in what is now Ongjin County, Hwanghae-do Province in North Korea. Lee Hun says that historically, several relics related to Lee Yong-sang once remained in that region as well.
요게 이제 그 60년대 가가지고 그 학자가 가서 찍어온 사진입니다. 이게 화산리예요. 이게 화산리. 그 다음에 이제 이게 만국단이 있는 광대산 쪽에 있는 만국단인 쪽에 이렇게 저희 시조가 올라가서 베트남을 바라보면서 그려하면서 항상 거기 앉아있던 자리. 그 다음에 요게 수학문 기적비. 여기.
In 1253, when Mongol forces invaded Goryeo, Lee Yong-sang is said to have made great contributions by fighting against them. To commemorate this, an inscription called the Suhangmun Kijokbi, which means the monument commemorating the gate where surrender was secured was erected.
Lee Yong-sang informed soldiers of military strategies, and after 5 months of fierce fighting, the enemy suffered a major defeat. The enemy then proposed to surrender and sent 5 golden chests as tribute. Yi saw through the deception, drilled holes into the chests, and poured boiling water into them, killing 5 assassins hiding inside with swords. He then resealed the holes with iron powder and returned the chests. The Mongol army was so shocked that they surrendered on the spot and fled. When this news reached the king, he was so impressed that he named the local guardian mountain Hwasan after a mountain in Vietnam and granted Yi the title Lord of Hwasan.
However, this monument was erected in 1903, several centuries after Lee Yong-sang's death. Many original records about him were lost, and the content we have today was reconstructed by later generations. For this reason, some scholars argue that more in-depth research is needed. Lee Hun has continued working on updating the family genealogy and making it more accessible for others to understand.
명행도라고 그래가지고 학렬이에요. 영자, 상자, 훈자 이렇게 돼 있잖아요. 이제 저희 할아버님, 아버님, 저. 지금 42대까지 되어 있습니다. 42대까지 학렬인데 그 후에 이제 학렬을 만들기 위해서 또 지금 노력하고 있고. 아직도 뭐 저는 이 화산 씨에 대해서 배울 거는 아직도 많고 한 10분이라도 모르는 것 같아요. 계속 공부를 하고 있고 그다음에 또 자료도 계속 찾고 있고 그래서 이제 한국인뿐만 아니고 베트남에서도 자료를 계속 받아갖고 제가 뭐 베트남어를 모르니까 계속 번역을 쉽게 보고 있고 그래서
The Hwasan Lee Clan genealogy you're looking at now is a copy, and the original can be found at the National Library of Korea. The handwriting style changes depending on when the genealogy was written. As we flipped through the pages, we could really feel how long this family's history stretches back. Although Prince Lee Yong-sang first settled in Imjin County, Hwanghae-do Province, a region that now lies within North Korea, there are still places in South Korea where traces of his descendants, the Hwasan Lee Clan, can be found. After about a 3-hour drive from Seoul, we arrived in Bonghwa County, located in the northernmost part of Gyeongsang-buk-do Province. Even though it's far from Ongjin, we can still find a community of the Hwasan Lee Clan here. But how did the Hwasan Lee Clan come to live here? Actually, it began when Lee Il-chung, Lee Yong-sang's second son, was appointed as governor of Andong. His descendants then settled in the Andong and Bonghwa region, establishing roots that continue to this day. In particular, Lee Won-suk, the 9th-generation descendant of Lee Il-chung, settled in Changpyeong District, Bonghwa County. Since then, for over 500 years, the descendants of Vietnam's royal lineage, the Hwasan Lee Clan, have continued to live in this area for generations. And near this clan village stands a striking hanok, a traditional Korean house. This hanok is called Chunghyodang. Now designated as a cultural heritage site by Gyeongsang-buk-do Province, Bonghwa's Chunghyo-dang was built to honor Lee Jang-bal, the great-grandson of Lee Won-suk, who settled in this area. In 1592, Japan invaded Joseon, beginning a devastating war that would last 7 years. In response to the invasion, militias known as Uibyong or righteous armies rose up across the country. These militias played a crucial role in defending the nation. One of the many who volunteered to fight as righteous armies was Lee Yong-sang, the 14th generation descendant of the Hwasan Lee Clan. At the time, the Bonghwa region was considered relatively safe from Japanese attacks. And Lee Yong-sang, just 19 years old, was the head of his household, caring for his elderly mother and a newborn child. But the person who urged Lee Yong-sang to go to war was none other than his own mother.
The country is in chaos, and the loyalty between ruler and subject is weightier than the affection between mother and son. Have you not heard that lacking the courage to go to war in such times is not true filial piety?
And so, at the age of 19, Lee Yong-sang joined the fight during the Imjin War. They say that when the militia forces reached Mungyang, he led the charge into enemy lines. Tragically, he lost his life on the battlefield. Chunghyodang is a shrine built in 1750 by Lee Yong-sang's descendants and local Confucian scholars at the site of his birth home, to honor his loyalty, sacrifice, and untimely death. And here, we met someone with deep knowledge of both Chunghyodang and the life of Lee Yong-sang.
리태조의 37세 손이고 화산이시 정친의 사무국장을 맡고 있는 이시창입니다. 반갑습니다.
네, 반갑습니다.
He's been familiar with Chunghyodang since childhood, often visiting it and participating in ancestral rites held there in honor of Lee Yong-sang with his elders.
저렇게 주련이 있는데요. 충효당 이장발공이 전투 중 전사하시면서 남긴 순절시입니다.
To preserve the nation's legacy for 100 years, I donned my armor in the 6th month. My body falls in sorrow for my country, but my soul returns, unable to forget my parents.
사실 여기가 저희 화산이시 집성촌인데 이제는 세월이 많이 지나고 해서 어른들도 돌아가시고 또 그렇게 해서 몇 가구 남아있지는 않습니다만은 최초로 여기에 화산이시가 정착한 그런 장소입니다. 저도 여기서 태어났고요. 저기에 보면은 화반에 연꽃을 음각해 놓았습니다. 이게 연꽃은 지금 베트남의 국화인데 사실은 그 한 200년 전에도 화산이시가 베트남하고의 관계가 있다는 것을 이제 극적으로 이제 표현하고 있다 이렇게 생각하시면 돼요.
Behind Chunghyodang stands a commemorative stone monument. And here, we discovered that someone had placed flowers.
베트남 어느 분이 오셔서 이 꽃을 두고 가셨는데 꼭 오면 여기 오면 이렇게 꽃을 가지고 오고 참배를 하고 또 충효당 오면은 이 참배를 하고 또 조상을 기리는 그런 것들 참 가슴이 찡합니다. 이 꽃을 보면. 예.
베트남들이 좀 많이 오시나요?
예. 주말이면 많이 오시고요.
The Vietnamese LýDynasty was the first independent dynasty. Because of this, the LýDynasty holds symbolic significance in Vietnamese history, representing national identity and pride. Perhaps that's why so many Vietnamese visitors come to this very place, where traces of the Lee dynasty's descendants remain.
리 왕조는 베트남 역사의 본질, 정체성, 자긍심, 건간이라고 할 수 있습니다. 따라서 베트남 사람들이 가장 먼저 리 왕조에 대한 관심을 가지게 될 것이고 리 왕조의 역사 유산이 있는 봉화에 대해서도 깊은 관심을 가질 것은 당연합니다. 두 나라가 사라지지 않는 한 영원히 봉화 유산은 나름의 의미가 있을 것이라고 생각합니다.
Last year, the Vietnamese ambassador also visited Chunghyodang.
The first impression that when I arrived in Bonghwa was that the culture between Vietnam and Korea. We have a lot of things in common. I mean, Vietnam and Korea have a lot of things in common, especially in culture, in the way of thinking, and sometimes in the way how they conduct themselves in terms of serving the country.
In 1995, 3 years after Korea and Vietnam established diplomatic ties, the Vietnamese government invited the members of the Hwasan Lee Clan Association to Vietnam. It was the first official contact in 769 years since Prince Lee Yong-sang left Vietnam.
1995년 4월 12일 날 처음으로 베트남에 들어가게 됐습니다. 그 수교 이후 베트남에 가서 그쪽 관료들도 좀 만나보고 또 많은 얘기를 듣고 또 저희가 하고 싶었던 얘기, 근데 저희 화산 씨에 대해서 많이 얘기를 하고 한국에서 생활하고 있죠. 베트남에 가서 어떻게 알려드리고 그런 거를 많이 상의를 하고 있습니다.
Today, the Vietnamese government officially recognizes the Hwasan Lee Clan as descendants of the Lee dynasty.
This is the first time ever that we recognize some families from outside as descendants of a dynasty. They have that kind of family tree that go down to the history a long time ago, and those papers are well preserved. To my knowledge, it's the first and ever case that we recognize this fact.
Through the story of Prince Lee Yong-sang's settlement in Goryeo and the legacy of his descendants, Korea and Vietnam are continuing to build cultural bridges, creating new opportunities for deeper connection between the two nations. One particularly noteworthy example is the growing partnership between Bonghwa County and TűSơnCity, the hometown of Emperor Lee Taito, the founder of the Lee dynasty. We spoke via video call with a government official working in TűSơnCity to learn more about this connection.
Hello, my name is Thu Minh Lê. I'm an officer in TűSơnCity. I'm in charge of foreign relationship field between TűSơnCity and other countries in the world. Do Festival is one of the biggest festival in TűSơnCity, and Do Temple is one of the national relics in Vietnam. This festival attracts many tourists, especially the Bonghwa County. They often visit our city at that time, and also the Lee Hwasan family line. They often come to our city to join the festival.
The Do Temple Festival is held each year in TűSơnCity, the birthplace of Emperor Lee Taito, the founder of the Lee dynasty. Every year, the city formally invites the Hwasan Lee Clan to the festival and honors them as royal descendants.
15th of March, lunar year. Yes, okay. We often celebrate a big parade to show our respect and our pride to the Lee dynasty, especially Lee Taito King. Every year, we usually send an invitation to the country, to the Bonghwa country, and the Lee Hwasan family line to visit Vietnam. Yes, and we also have some exchange to Bonghwa County because the Prince Lee Long-tường set the foundation, and he also like the first ancestor of Lee Hwasan family line in Bonghwa city, Bonghwa country in Korea. His descendants still build strong relationship between Vietnam and Korea.
The story of Prince Lee Yong-sang and the Hwasan Lee Clan. Also inspired by it, Bonghwa County is now preparing a major new project called the KVietnamValley. The KVietnamValley refers to a Vietnam village project to be developed in Bonghwa County, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, home to the Hwasan Lee Clan's community and Chunghyodang. Originally, Bonghwa County planned to transform the area around Chunghyodang, a site of about 40,000 square meters, into a tourist attraction. But the Vietnam Village project expanded into an intergovernmental cultural exchange initiative and is now expected to grow even larger in scale. Once the KVietnamValley is complete, many Koreans and Vietnamese will visit the site, learn about each other's histories, and enjoy one another's cultures.
베트남 문화와 한국 문화가 공존하고 한국 사람과 베트남 사람이 함께 살아가는 그런 장소, 또 베트남인이 방문했을 때에도 고향 같은 동네, 베트남과 한국의 관계가 좀 더 가까워질 수 있는 그런 또 장소가 될 것이고,
유일하게 남쪽에 봉화엠과 충효당이라는 게 있고 그쪽에서 테마가 조성되고 있으니까 그게 활발하게 잘 조성되고 그쪽에서 이제 한국과 베트남에 많이 왕래를 해가면서 그쪽에 교류하면서 활성화가 됐으면 좋을 것 같습니다.
The hidden story between Korea and Vietnam is the story of Prince Lee Yong-sang of the Vietnamese LýDynasty, who settled on the Korean Peninsula 800 years ago, and of his descendants. While preparing this episode, our team discovered a connection between Korea and Vietnam that we hadn't known before. And just by learning about this unknown history, Vietnam began to feel much closer and more familiar to us.
A prince from the Lee dynasty went to Korea, settled in Korea, and also contributed to the development of the Korean nations. So that is why we always say that between Vietnam and Korea, there is a bone, a blood bone somewhere in the history. And the relationship between Korea and Vietnam has established not 30 years ago, but 800 years ago.
Starting with this small fragment of history, the story of Prince Lee Yong-sang and the Hwasan Lee Clan, we hope it will lead to something even greater between the two nations.